We are back. Before we jump into public comment on any of the items on our agenda or items not on our agenda, I do have two items to address, one serious, one not as much so. But on the first one, we'll start on the one of more consequence. On Friday, the Billings Police Department issued a press release that alerted the community to the fact that a missing persons report involving a 12-year-old boy, later identified as Andy Paul Beartusk Martinez, had been upgraded to a homicide investigation after a deceased person, later determined to be Andy, had been found at a residence on the 900 block of Terry Avenue. Although I have no information on this matter beyond what's been publicly reported, it's clear that the situation involved a tragic and heartbreaking series of events. The victim's family, friends, and anyone impacted by this tragedy have our sympathy and sincere condolences. I encourage all of us to keep all of them in our thoughts and prayers. The Billings Police Department has arrested two persons of interest in connection with this tragic death, and the investigation is ongoing. With that, the other item that I just wanted to address is tonight is basketball night, and we have one authority on the council who is an expert on that. And so, Councilmember Aspenleiter, in recognition and in anticipation, you know what in the world I'm talking about, and you can inform the rest of the world, you get your pick, but I get the other one, all right? So you can wear that while you make your announcement, and I'll get the other one. Your choice, whatever one you want, okay.
All right. So MSUB women's basketball team is playing in the Region 8, or the West Region Championship tonight at 8. They knocked off the 1 seed in that region in their hometown on their home court, won by 10 points, I believe. So they play tonight at 8 o'clock. Please tune in online if you can. Support the Yellow Jackets and the hopes that they make the Elite Eight. So let's go Yellow Jackets and Coach Wooden.
Go Jackets. All righty. Congratulations. And the men are out, but they did had a fabulous season. Fabulous season. Yeah, we'll do that. With that, then, we will open up for public comment on anything that's on our agenda tonight or not on our agenda. We will have an opportunity for public comment as we get into each of the items. So don't feel like you have to comment if it's something on the agenda now. You'll have an opportunity later. But if you've got to leave and your item is farther down the agenda, we don't want you to leave without having to have an opportunity to comment. So is there anything on our agenda or not on our agenda before we go to our first item, which will be the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee report? Any public comment at this time? Okay, no one is coming forward, so we'll close the initial public comment period and bring up our first item, which is that Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee report. And Elise, I'm assuming you are going to lead us through that one.
Well, I'm really just here to introduce the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee members. So if anyone's not aware, I'm Elise Manath, the Active Transportation Planner. And tonight we have 3 of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee members here. We've got Dave, Joan, and Christy. And they're going to be sharing their annual report with you all. The Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, or BPAC as we like to shorten it to, is a 7-member citizen advisory committee that advises the City Council, the County Commissioners, and the Planning Board, and all those various staff associated with those on issues related to biking and walking and rolling. And the City Council appoints 3 of those members. The county commissioners appoint 3, and then the planning board appoints 1. So it's a little bit of a unique committee. But without further ado, I think I'll let Dave, I believe, who's starting, get started, and I'll pull up the presentation.
Thank you. Dave.
Evening, Mayor Cole and Council. Yeah, as Elise said, we're the Billings area Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, BPAC. Our group is, there's 7 members, like she said. Our chair is Nikki Zimmer. She represents the county. I'm the vice chair representing the planning board. Joan Shy is represents the county as well. Christy Drake, the city. Jason Wood, county. Anna O'Donnell, city, and Stephanie Donovan, city. Oh. Oh, okay. There we go. All right. Our focus is ensuring our community's infrastructure enables people to walk, bike, and use a wheelchair safely. And the scope of our group is we can do things on kind of a micro level where we're looking at, even individual sidewalk squares that may be in need of repair, as well as, larger road projects within the county. We advise the city and county regarding non-motorized transportation issues. We ensure advice is rooted in community needs by soliciting and compiling public comments, trends. We maintain a relationship with the elected officials and planning board. And we use the Billings Area Bikeway and Trails Master Plan as guidance. And there it is. I don't know if we're not going to get too deep into it, but it's going to be updated this year. And we do use that as kind of our general guidance. We can keep track of what's proposed. We review and accept public comment on non-motorized transportation needs. Public comment is accepted at our monthly meetings, and also online comments report from City County Planning. Our 2023 survey to get input from the public on issues facing Billings and Yellowstone County residents regarding biking and walking. We collected comments off of, it was posted on the City of Billings Facebook page. We received 120 comments, and we're using that survey data to prioritize the top issues and inform our elected officials. And I believe Christy's going to go through good luck.
Thank you.
There you go.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So what we had several questions that were really interesting. One of them was, what matters most to you about access to safe bicycling, walking, and wheelchair facilities? Check all that apply. So I believe 32% said that designated trail system was the most important. 37% wanted more trails to work and school, and 31% wanted more connected trails. I might be reversing those. I am, thank you. My old eyes can't see up there so well. But 48%, almost half, wanted all three of those things. Okay. And then we also asked, are there particular connections that are important to you? And we heard a lot of, probably number one was access from the valley to the rims. So we pulled out some of their actual comments for you to read. Build the Zimmerman Trail Connector, which they don't realize is, it's been called the Stagecoach Trail, so that we can get to the heights from the west end on a bike. Need a connection from the west side up to the rims. Also need better connectivity to the river and to downtown. And then we go into downtown. Lots of people want that. We need much better, especially safer connectivity between downtown and the heights, downtown and the Yellowstone River, and between the valley and the rims. We also need to design the downtown streets so that they are more friendly to bicyclists. Walkers can use sidewalks, but there are currently very few protected bike lanes downtown. And then another said, safely navigating downtown for bicyclists of all ages and abilities, not just those able to ride at the speed of traffic. Connecting downtown to surrounding neighborhoods. Division Street is a barrier. Connection, or getting between the heights and downtown. We see some patterns here. The medical corridor in downtown is important. I work at the hospital and live in the tree streets. I don't feel safe commuting to work with regard to traffic and crimes activity. Again, trying to get to downtown on a bike is a terrifying ordeal. And last, more trails. The trails we have for biking are few and often too short, or they don't connect. Makes it hard to go for long walks, bike rides, or other outdoor activities. It does not help to attract companies to Billings. It would be good to have more bike paths that do not parallel major roads. The one along the big ditch is a nice example, and up at the rims. And last, they asked for signage. The current trail system could use much better directional signage and informational signage. Most common areas of concern are crosswalks. Tons of people ask for crosswalks. So many ask for crosswalks across Rimrock. And then speed. And I have, I won't go through all those, but this is an example of the many, many comments that we've received on this survey. So kind of got all those in two categories. What residents are saying, they want more law enforcement. They want to have our law enforcement enforce violations, especially speeding, crosswalks, traffic signals, inattentive drivers, and code enforcement. They want more infrastructure to ensure trail connectivity, maintenance, ADA access, or ADA compliance and access, and separation for bikes and cars, or pedestrians and bikes versus cars. And then public safety, crime, transients, trail safety, trash, and graffiti. Other data to address concerns is one thing we've been doing for the past 14 months, I believe, is to review crash data from the Billings Police Department. And we try to get people to report as much as possible, even if there hasn't been a major injury, but we really need that data because that data goes to MDT, and then MDT uses that data for deciding where to put better infrastructure. So we document the crashes that occur and show areas of need for possible signage or other infrastructure. One thing we noticed a lot of people turning and hitting bicyclists and pedestrians. Happens over and over and over. Usually it's a pedestrian or a bicyclist crossing legally in a sidewalk where there's a turn lane or somebody turning, and that happens a lot. So 21% of the crashes involved a hit and run. Let's see, bicyclist or pedestrian was at fault. There were 21% of bicyclist or pedestrian crashes where those were at fault, but 58% were turn and hit. Some of them, 11% was driver ran a red light, and 10% was a distracted driver. So from these data, we recommend that the city probably do a PSA campaign about turning and hitting and some of these behaviors that we find, that can be fatal. There were several fatalities in that crash data that we looked at. So a media campaign involving social media, PSAs on TV, radio to educate both drivers and pedestrians and bicyclists on safe behaviors. And then obviously change the infrastructure, add marked crosswalks in selected high traffic areas. And finally, about data, the trail counts, we always have that every year. So trail users are using our trails more and more than ever. One thing to note that in 2022 and 2023, The Colson Park Trail, where the I-90 overpass is being, the I-90 bridge is being constructed, has closed down that trail. And so that has affected the numbers, but we know that if that trail was open, that number would, those stats would be higher. And then lastly, the bike lane usage. I'm not sure why it looks like 2023 is a little lower. And I don't know if Elise can answer to that question, but we do know that people love their trails, and I love the bike lanes. So now we have Joan Shy, who's going to bring up the rear and finish this up. And we're available for questions if you need them.
Okay. Hi, I'm Joan Shy. Thank you for letting me come and talk to you. We do want to applaud the city and the county and the state for their efforts. We've had a lot of good things happening this last year. You can see in 2023, we had the Billings bypass. The Skyline Trail was put up, bike lanes on both sides of hilltops, bike lanes on Reberg to Grand Avenue, and then multi-use trails along Milani Lane, et cetera. With the big goal of that marathon loop, which for me personally, that would be very exciting if we can get that going. Help us help you be successful. Recognize there is broad support for trails and bikeways from the general public, the health community, and the business community. Recognize and support active transportation improvements in Billings and Yellowstone County. I think we're doing that fairly well. Increased collaboration between other governmental entities like MDT, create a shared vision for vibrant Billings and Yellowstone County. Review the data we provide to analyze and identify where we can have improvements. Increase traffic enforcement for red light violators and distracted drivers, impaired drivers, and I'm going to say for pedestrians. I was surprised by the number of pedestrians that were the cause of accidents. Educate bicyclists and pedestrians to be consistent with signaling their intentions. Okay, last year, the city council asked us kind of to look at sidewalk funding in other areas. So we called the cities that are about the same size as we are: Helena, Great Falls, Missoula, Bozeman. Went out of state and talked to Reno and Bend. Interestingly, we're all in the exact same boat. Nobody has a magic answer or a magic bullet of how we're going to do sidewalks. All cities are kind of struggling with the same issue. Sidewalks are important, but we don't want to place too much burden on the homeowners, and especially those that are on fixed incomes. If you look, there was an article, January 28th, I think it was, in Missoula, a really good article about sidewalk, costs and how they had an assessment of $9,000 for a family on a fixed income, and they were afraid they were not going to be able to stay in their home. So they're, like us, everybody's looking at what we can do. We cannot provide anything magical to help pay for our sidewalks. So all Helena, Great Falls, Missoula, we're all kind of struggling with the same thing, doing the variation of the same thing. What I found real interesting, Bend, Oregon, which you always think of as a very progressive, or I think of Oregon as kind of progressive, 100% of the responsibility of sidewalks is to the homeowners. So they have no support other than the homeowners paying for it. Okay, any questions? I'm going to make one comment. I don't know if anybody recognized that man on 40th. I stopped and talked to him one day. He lives in the assisted living. He walks down to the gas station at Grand and 40th every day that the multi-use trail allows it. And I said, I said, I'm so impressed. And he goes, well, I'm not going to get better if I don't get out and walk every day. So, that's an example of how important the multi-use trails is to one gentleman in our community. Okay, questions?
I believe his name is Jim, and he is the best, no offense, Christie, the best advocate for trails in our entire city.
Yeah,
I would say, right there. But questions for Joan, Christie, Dave? Well, I guess the question I have for any of you is, you've made some great recommendations there. I'd hate to have those dropped, and just now that you've made that report to us, I'd hate to have you think that now magically those things will all happen. So my encouragement would be work with the departments wherever they may be relevant. We can help in whatever way we can, but you shouldn't just assume that now you've made your report, there, it's done. Unless I'm wrong about that, Chris, maybe you've already got these things all taken care of. Right? That little word of wisdom, I guess. Councilmember Ripsis?
Thank you, Mayor. Elise, I was just wondered if you had any, Chrissy kind of called you out a little bit, wondered if you had any thoughts on why bike lane mileage might have been, or counts, been down over the last couple of years?
I don't know for sure. I think there was definitely a big bicycling boom during the pandemic, and so the counts went up quite a bit during the pandemic, and then, maybe returned to kind of more normal levels. I don't know if it also might have something to do with the fact that, maybe more people are working at home now, and so maybe they're not commuting as much. I'm not entirely sure. Those were kind of my two thoughts.
Okay. Councilmember Giller?
Are we doing counts on the neighborhood bikeways as well? I wonder if maybe that's taken some traffic that would otherwise be counted as well.
Yeah, that was actually another thought, we did add the neighborhood bikeway. That was kind of an amalgamation of all the counts, but maybe they're being more kind of spread out over different locations.
Are we counting though on the neighborhood bikeway, or is that included in the counts?
We are, yeah.
Okay, all right, so that would be inclusive.
Christy?
Thank you. I just wanted to do a follow-up about the sidewalk funding research. Some of the communities that we asked also had like an application that homeowners could send in if they felt like they couldn't pay for a sidewalk. And so there were certain criteria on, their threshold of their income, and then they could, and I think that Missoula was one of those, and then Reno was another one as well where they could apply, so.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Ripsis?
Yeah, I just had one more thought for the committee, and Elise. It's been in the news a bunch over the last few months, but Hoboken, New Jersey, since 2017 has reported exactly 0 traffic deaths. That's vehicular, pedestrian, bicyclist. 0 over that 7 years. It's very impressive. If you're looking for opportunities for, what should we be doing here in Billings, I think we should be taking a look and seeing if we're truly interested in solving this. I noticed in your presentation we've had 2 pedestrian deaths over the last 14 months, and who knows how many, vehicle deaths. I know several large, high-profile, tragic incidents, certainly. If we're truly committed to Vision Zero, we should be looking at these things and looking for cities that have a better example and figuring out why we're not experiencing that success. So I encourage you to do that and bring any ideas forward.
Yeah, thank you. Let's open up, Councilmember Nice, you have a question before we open for public comment? Go ahead.
Yeah, I did have a question about the survey. I don't know who I can address this to, but I was wondering, when that survey was concluded, and then I think you said there's 120 respondents. We have 120,000 people in our city, and I'm trying to wonder how, I don't think that would be statistically valid, but is there a way that you can get surveys that are a little bit more valid?
So, thanks for the question. We are working on our pedestrian and bicycle master plan. So we're also collecting data there. But I think, 120 respondents, there's still people who are really interested in the trail system. I was actually looking up what would be kind of the correct number of responses for a city our size. And for something that was in the parameters, I think you only needed like 196 or something for like 95% confidence and 7% variation. So I don't think it's too far off. Definitely it's not statistically valid in terms of like they didn't survey, like this part of the community and this part of the community, and this, it was kind of whoever responded. But I think it still provides valuable information.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at, is because you've got, I think at one of the graphs showed 500 people using the bike lanes, and yet even of the 500, only 120 maybe responded. So I think when we look at surveys, I like to see more statistically valid surveys, not kind of in-house surveys where we're kind of getting the opinion of those of the users. We're always going to get positive results of those of the users, but it would be nice to see surveys that actually show what the public at large shows. Thank you.
Thanks.
If you guys have a response to that question, sure.
We don't think that it was a biased survey because there was, we had the city of Billings send it out on their Facebook. And so it wasn't something that we were just putting out there to, people we knew were using it. And at some point I will, as a put my Billings TrailNet hat on, we did do a statistically valid survey, and we had a professor, review it, and that one we would love to share with you at some point. But and that's got similar, information. But yeah, the collection method, I believe, I don't think that was biased.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's have public comment on this item. Number one, this is, you're welcome to comment. Please come forward if you would like to be heard on this bike ped report. Ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes. Yeah, do we have any public comment on item number one? Any public comment on item number one? No one's coming forward, so we'll close the public comment period. Council, I don't know if you had any other questions or comments on the topic generally, but if so, this would be a good opportunity to do so. I'll just comment on the 800-pound gorilla that actually is not in the room because it hasn't been mentioned, but it's always there, and that's money. At our retreat planning session over the weekend, we really didn't get into the issue of funding for recreational trails. Unfortunately, we still don't have a dedicated source of funding. And so back to the Bike Ped Committee, I encourage you to continue to work on that ongoing problem that we've had for decades. We do have funding source within the right-of-way through our street development arterial fee if it's a major street, potentially anyway. And occasionally it might be monies in parks, but those dollars are stretched and we don't have extra dollars in our general fund, unfortunately. So anyway, I just wanted to recognize the reality of the lack of a funding source for our recreational trail program. Anything else? Councilmember Gulick.
I would just point out that many of the comments were related to downtown, how it's not really accessible right now to people biking or easily. But that next year, we'll be able to report, things that we've made progress on. There'll be we got some good progress there with the work that's planned for this summer. That's already been budgeted and paid for.
Very good. Thank you. Anything before we move to item 2? Don't see anything. So thank you, committee members. We appreciate your service. We know it's sometimes thankless, but much appreciated, much valued. Thank you. Item number 2 is our supportive housing report. Chris, I think you're going to introduce our presenters on that, so I'll turn it to you.
Yes, we've got several of us participated in a trip to Boise in late 2023, and we've got Dean here to kind of, the focus of that trip was permanent supportive housing. We had Councilmember Rupsis, myself, Legislator Yakowicz, and several others from our community with the Continuum of Care as well as other entities. And tonight that's what Dean would like to present to us, what we know from data around the country as well as what we saw there in Boise. So Dean, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. All right, so great to be here. I'm Dean Wells with United Way of Yellowstone County. And so big thank you to council, thank you to Mayor Cole, and thank you to City Administrator Kukulski also for letting us be here and for joining our trip too. That was great to have you on there. So really, we're just looking at three things today we want to do. As was just mentioned, we want to give an overview of that Boise trip. That was a trip that the COC took to explore their permanent supportive housing system there in Boise. And we also want to give the group just a really quick, broad overview of what is permanent supportive housing in general. And then third, what is the permanent supportive housing project potential here in the Billings area? So huge, and I want to give credit to the COC, all the members and everybody. We've had multiple meetings to develop this presentation, and it's so much passion. This could have been a 3-hour presentation with 100 different slides. So we really narrowed it down as much as we could, and we're going to go through it pretty quickly, but there's a lot more that could be said. Let's jump ahead here. Maybe. It's not me? Am I just turning the lights or the?
Point it to the computer, see if that makes a difference.
It's a PDF, so it may not move it forward.
I can move it forward.
Oh, look at that, we're really going now.
I can slide it for you.
Okay,
if you want
thank
to
you.
just tell me next.
I'll just point at you and do this.
Yeah,
Thanks, I appreciate it. So if you go to the next slide, please.
Wow.
No, it really goes fast, doesn't
Pretty
it?
touchy.
Yeah.
Is this next?
Perfect, yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, so just really quick, big overview, what is permanent supportive housing? So really, it's a national program. It's been going around the nation for quite a few years now, and has been here in Montana the last few years. So this slide just really gives you a quick 4 points about it. First, it's affordable housing, not necessarily free housing, but affordable based on the individual. Second, of course, as you would imagine by the title, it's permanent. And what that really means is there's no set deadline when the person has to transition out. So that makes it different than transitional housing. You know, there's still that hope and that goal, and a lot of people will transition out, but that's not a requirement and that's not the reason for this program. Services integrated, that's such a huge power there. Those services are right there on site or extremely nearby or delivered. And those are the, healthcare services, counseling, mental health services, treatment, all those things that's needed to keep that person not just into housing, but stable into housing and help them to grow. And then client-driven, really based on what are those individual needs for that person and their level of readiness. So looking at who is part of it, so permanent supportive housing, this is a lot here, but I kind of look at it as it's two things. Permanent supportive housing serves people who are chronically homeless and high utilizers of services. So on the right here, you'll kind of see those common characteristics. And that first one is that chronic homelessness. Also, a lot of the clients, they're that highest need, that highest risk group, that hardest to house group. That group where agencies come together and say, we're really struggling. We get this person housed and we just can't keep them stabilized. So they're back on the streets, they're using resources, they're all of this. So often chronic conditions, often more than one condition, multiple conditions, and often involved with disabilities. That's physical disabilities, mental health, addiction, all those things. And you might recognize on the left, that's a chart from the Downtown Billings Alliance from their survey on the chronic high utilizers. So again, the permanent supportive housing population serves those really high utilizers who are utilizers of the criminal justice system, law enforcement, the emergency departments, all of those things that we know have that burden on those systems. There we go. Permanent supportive housing is really just one part of the solution. There's so many great things in there. This does not necessarily replace anything else, but it serves as a very powerful tool specifically for that high utilizer, high need population. And one thing that they're seeing around the country is some really good impact on it. One of the first things that caught our attention was that hope that this program could reduce the burden on law enforcement, medical, all that sort of thing. And they're finding that around the country. So it's a great thing, a lot of great things. But I think the bottom one there is one that we don't talk about all the time. We kind of get so caught up in all the great things it does for the community, but it also just changes those lives, those individual lives. It has that power to really change them and put that person on a path towards something much different. So really quick, that's just what permanent supportive housing is in general. Permanent, it's affordable, it's permanent, services are provided, and it's for persons who are the chronic homeless and high utilizers of services. So this next part is looking at our trip to Boise. Great trip. I think there was probably about 17, 18 people that went, COC members, and then Council Member Rupus was there. Chris, you were there, was City Administrator Kukalski. Chris, okay, I'm never quite sure how to. Chris was there. And then we also had a Representative Yakowicz was there too. So that was a great representation. It was a great group to show up, and Boise just went all out for us. We had meeting after meeting with different groups. They gave us insights. They gave us so much time, so much attention. And then we actually also toured three of the sites. So this is the first one here. This is New Path. And this is the one that started it all for them. It's been around for a few years now. And 41 units, they have an on-site property manager who lives there 24 hours a day. And then they have those services right there on site. As you see, pretty comprehensive support. And then we also got to go visit the next site, which was Valor Point. And this is one of their newer ones. And this was really a great opportunity because it's veteran specific. And it was just really, I thought, inspirational to see that approach. And again, services provided, I believe, and I should say right now that with all this great stuff they gave us in Boise, I'm sure my brain did not process everything correctly or remember everything. So if I get something wrong, all of those that were there, please jump in. But I'm pretty sure there was one of the sites, and I think it was this one, that had the services across the street. So on-site is such a huge thing, but in this case, it was just more appropriate, more efficient to have the services across the street. So it was still less than a 2-minute walk to get the help that was needed. So great program. We got to look at some of their upcoming projects. We got to drive by a couple you see on the right. But that big picture there, that's their vision for their next one. And it was just a great opportunity to see how scalable and replicable this program is. And based on the success they've already had, they've really gone all in to grow it with this one, 96 units. And this one we got to see actually just in the dirt, just construction area, dirt and trucks and everything all around. And we got to spend some time talking with the developer, which I thought was really insightful on the expertise that went into specifically permanent supportive housing. I mean, this is just not just housing. There's so much that goes into this that's really specialized. A little bit of that insights on that structure. So these are just some inside pictures of New Path. The ones on the left there are pictures of the units. So they're pretty modest, they're small, but they're also very clean, very dignified. And the picture on the right there is the community gathering area. So most of the sites would have some sort of area for social interaction, for classes, for educational sessions, whatever it might be. Looking also just kind of some insights that we gained from the structure is the idea of how they structured their programs. So the first two there looks at the structures for occupancy and services. So in Boise, it was that single site, which means that all the residents live together in the same building. And then the services were provided right there on site or extremely nearby, like just across the street. We did want to point out, though, that there is the scattered site option used around the country. And that's where people are housed, basically wherever they can get housing throughout the community. And then a plan is put into place for connecting with those persons and providing services in a more mobile fashion. Mixed use was one that came up. A lot of these programs, we saw a mixed use of subsidized and non-subsidized units. One of the facilities, they actually had a system in place where people would start in the subsidized units. And as they developed, as they got more independent, they would move up into the non-subsidized. and they get a chance to really, get used to paying rent, get used to all of those things, kind of get that rhythm down before transitioning into independent housing. This one, so many partners, of course. We're just so impressed on how many partners throughout Boise came together, and we can see that here too. So it's just been really, really inspirational. Looking at individually, we looked at some partnerships in the next slide that were around funding. City of Boise, they stepped up big time. Other projects, the Housing Authority there with project vouchers, the county stepped in with some funding. There was a lot of work around low-income tax credits, as well as loans, home funds, that sort of thing, and then just some grant writing also. And the commitment, though, also went way beyond funding. So this one really shows one of the really impressive things that we were all excited about was the City of Boise actually employs the director of the COC there. So they have a COC similar to ours in a lot of ways, and they have a director, which of course the COC would love to have. And that director was an actual employee of the city, which that brought so many benefits, and we talked so much about the value of that. Those experienced developers, we talked a bit about that already, and one thing that came up with that is the idea of trauma-informed design. So I don't think they did that in their first design, but from that point on, they've been able to put in trauma-informed practices into the actual design of the building to help enhance the atmosphere. So we talked a lot with the group about what we could share around those key successes in Boise. No surprises. Obviously, we've talked about most of this stuff here already. One thing we haven't talked about, though, is that trusted external evaluator. And we all know how important evaluation is, and we've talked so much about that need for data and for assessment. So they actually partnered with Boise State for their data and the external evaluator. So we just thought that was a great insight for our work on that importance of an external evaluator to help bring all of those things and an expert in that area. They have a lot of the same challenges everyone else has. Funding, obviously, no big surprise, was one of their big challenges. But one of the things we really learned too is a big difference between funding for construction versus ongoing operations and specifically those supportive services. They told us repeatedly that as tough as it was to get funding for the construction, they are still struggling today, years later, to keep funding in place for those supportive services. So that's something we're really gonna have to look at also. So that's kind of a big overview of Boise. Here's a little bit on the impact that they've seen. And if you go to their website, they actually have a really nice website and they have more data available. This is just at the first 2 years. So I thought it was great. I loved that what they were hoping for seemed to come true in those first 2 years, that they did see that reduction in burden on emergency services, that 60%. They did see some cost avoidance, some cost savings, and they did see a lot of people really improving their lives and being impacted. So that's the Boise trip. Again, thanks to everybody. It was a great trip. Montana Healthcare Foundation actually sponsored that trip, so big thanks to them. So we want to finish by looking at what's our local group. So what's the local progress and work being done? So that's a project called Housing is Healthcare. And that's a project actually of the Montana Healthcare Foundation. They've been doing this around the state for the last few years. Helena, Bozeman, a few different areas. And it's just come here now in the last, well, not too long ago. And it's through a grant from the Montana Healthcare Foundation. It started with work by CSH, the Corporation for Supportive Housing. They did their part, a lot of stuff around assessment, data work, a lot of things. They're done, and now we just entered into a contract with Kaleidoscope Group. And they're gonna take all of that work that's already been done, put it together into a plan to move us forward. So we're pretty excited about that. We're gonna focus on, again, I just wanted to put this slide in there again as a reminder that this permanent supportive housing program will be for the persons who are experiencing homelessness, who are also those high utilizers, such as the ones we see in that chronic utilizer study. And where we are right now, on the left there, this is kind of how it makes me feel, is on the left. It's like we have all this great stuff. We have the needs assessment. We have eligibility criteria. We have all these commitments, all these ideas. We have agencies standing up and saying, yes, I want to be part of this. I want to help. Let's make this happen. But it's kind of like it's all out here. So Kaleidoscope's job is going to be the next step of really taking all that, putting us all on the same line, developing it, getting it all streamlined so we can then move forward with one good, solid plan of action. I'm hoping we can have that plan done in the next 4 months. And we're actually meeting this week for the first time with Kaleidoscope to get that started. And we're hoping we'll have some of those same outcomes that have been seen around the country. These are a couple outputs or impacts we want to just share from Helena. So they've been doing this not for very long. These are results from 6 months pre to 6 months post. So on the left is the ambulance use of persons in their program 6 months before participating in the program. And then on the right is ambulance use 6 months after participating in the program. So you'll see that they've seen some great results. And the next slide actually shows a little bit more broad of some of those results, looking at also the change pre to post in ER visits. MCRT is the Mobile Crisis Response Team. Thank you. And so again, just been great to see what Helena's done. And I think we have the potential to do some things that could be very similar. So with that, we are going to get together with our Kaleidoscope group, get together, bring that plan together, get it formalized, get it to the point where we really know exactly what we need. And then we'll be going out to partners and making more formal, more specific requests. But we did want to throw this out there just to show, here's an example of some of the biggest requests that we've been seeing around the country and in Boise. And it's some, obviously money. I mean, raining down money is a big part of any big program like this. But it's also things like the fee waivers and variances and support for the programs, land donations, all of those kind of things have been common. And that capital stack piece is one that Boise really helped us out with, that gives a tool we can use for kind of, as it suggests, stacking capital in a way that diversifies the funding, has some that's investments that have to be paid back quickly, some not so quickly, some never, some ongoing income, all those kind of things that can help us develop a more diverse, robust funding strategy. So that's where we're at. Thank you so much. Just again, wanted to give you that overview and that awareness of where we are and let you know how much we appreciate all that you've done and that we're hoping to be back again in a few months.
Thank you, Dean. Very educational. We appreciate it. Appreciate your hard work and everybody who went to Boise and the information you brought back. I'm going to ask if we got any questions, but I'm going to start with Councilmember Ripsis and also Chris and say we're on the Boise trip. Did you have anything that you wanted to point out before we open it up to the rest of our council members?
I don't really have anything to add. I was lucky enough to participate with Dean in putting the presentation together, so happy to just take any questions from any of you guys, whatever I can offer. It was just a very enlightening trip. Just seeing how all the different entities work together, how they, their city made a political decision that homelessness was something they wanted to tackle. And so that there was a lot of political support for making progress there. And to a T, nobody there would say that any of that would have happened if it hadn't been for the political body in Boise saying this is something that we want to focus on. They experienced the same thing as we did, probably more so in terms of housing prices going up and their homeless populations going right up with it. So if your housing prices go up, rental prices go up, you get more homelessness. We know that. It's universal. And we've been seeing that here in Billings and certainly other cities in the state, even to a greater extent. We're behind the curve here in Montana. Missoula, Helena, Bozeman have already kind of gone down this path and have programs in place. So we're going to take every opportunity we can to learn from them and then come up with a good program here in Billings. But ultimately, it will come down to the political body saying this is something that we think we need to do to benefit both the community and these individuals that are trapped in this chronic homeless scenario here. One of the things that was surprising to me when you looked at those charts and you saw that before permanent supportive housing, people were going, say, in Helena, 3.5 ER visits per person over 6 months prior to getting into permanent supportive housing, and then 1.5 afterwards. I'm thinking, well, why isn't that 0? it should go away, right? Isn't that the point? But what Dean said is absolutely true. You're targeting the most chronically homeless, the people with existing serious disabilities, mental health, physical health challenges. And those things don't go away immediately just because you have a roof over your head, stay in a stable living condition. But they can be impacted. They can make a huge impact on the financial costs of supporting those people, and it makes a huge impact on those on their well-being themselves. So a lot of learnings around that trip. Happy to take any questions, and I see a lot of people here that can also answer questions as well.
Thank you. Chris, anything? And then Councilmember Kennedy?
Only piece I would add, Mayor and Council, is just to repeat, just in round numbers, right? We talk here in this community spends about $10 million in this space. So for whether it's the human element of what's happening to those who are suffering with mental health, substance abuse, other issues, or it's purely dollars and cents, between Billings Clinic, St. V's, and ourselves, and some of our partners, we're about $10 million annually into this expense. So I'll leave it at that, and a lot of folks here smarter than I can answer questions for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Kennedy, Councilmember Gulick, Councilmember Tidswell?
I see Terry Todd's back there, and Terry, would you come up and answer a couple questions? On this, we just had a project that just finished up on Jackson Street. And that was a private nonprofit that went in there and built that. And they did say they're going to come back with another project. How are they funding that project, and how does it go about? And I have one other question.
Terry Todd, 135 Monarch Street. I am not entirely familiar. I understand the concept of what they did on Jackson, and it's different than this. What this does is provide the complete wraparound services that are needed to keep our chronically homeless and our unhoused neighbors into community. And it provides those long-term supports to keep them housed, which tends to be the one thing that we have a hard time with. We get people who are have been on the streets for a long period of time. You can't just put somebody into an apartment and assume that they're going to have what they need. And sometimes it's harder to keep people housed than it is to actually get them housed. And so this solves some of those problems. I don't know where the funding came from that project, but there is a lot of funding available for projects such as this. So obviously we're gonna have to have some buy-in from the city and the county. We're gonna have to have some buy-in from the state, but there is a lot of federal dollars and grant money that's available as well. Plus what we learned from Boise by creating the Capital Stack project that they did, which Dean is way better versed in talking about that than I am. That was a project where they figured out how to keep it sustainable long-term. And so ideally, it's something that will change what we are doing in Billings. It will change the dynamics of what we're doing. And we can't build ourselves out of this problem because it doesn't just take building apartments. It's going to take full case management and full supportive services, which right now you have a lot of community partners who are doing that work and have said that they will stand in that space and make sure that it happens. So that's kind of the benefit there.
Thank you. One other question. The Housing Authority spoke a couple weeks ago when I was at a breakfast, and they talked about doing, bringing in modulars from the Bakken. Mm-hmm. And they're supposed to be having so many more new units. How does the Housing Authority go with the continuum of care and offering living places for folks that we're talking about here?
So I can't speak for Patty and the Housing Authority, and I know she wishes she would be here, but she's out of town. So what they are doing with modulars, which they are not the only one, there are, I think, 3 projects in town. Currently, if I remember correctly, the last number I heard of people that were on the Section 8 waiting list for efficiencies in 1-bedroom, that number was over 310. I believe that the number for a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, I mean, it is exponentially larger. So we can build and build and build. But the problem is, this clientele, once again, you can't just put them into an apartment. You can't take them and put them into a modular in the Heights and think that that's going to solve the problem. They have to have full case management and wraparound services, or they won't stay housed. Now, that's not the long term, right? If they're there for 6 months, a year, what happens is you begin to see change lives, and then they can move out and move on to something else. The thing that I really loved when we looked at the Valor House was what it was doing for veterans and people who are suffering with PTSD. And the VA was actively involved in that house. It was actually VA case management that was taking part in that. And so we have a community that has lots of those resources. We just need to get everybody working together on that kind of stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Kitty, I'll just comment that the Jackson Court project was done by Gene Lauer out of Helena, and the real catalyst was low-income tax credits. And then they'll qualify for Section 8, and that'll be the long-term source of funding for decades into the future on that one.
Can I add one quick thing? And when we were there, one thing that we learned was that Patty can get specific, or Homefront would have the ability to apply for specific vouchers for this program that would not affect the vouchers in other places. So they have a VASH voucher, which is specific for veterans, and that would be, if we had a house that was specific to our veteran population, they could use those vouchers, therefore it would not affect, it would be in addition to what we currently have.
Very good. Councilmember Gulick and Councilmember Tisdale? And Councilmember Rowe on this issue? Sure. Councilmember Rowe, if that's okay.
Okay. Terry, I just want to make sure I didn't misunderstand what you just said, because I have known Homefront to be very thoughtful about permanent supportive housing. And I thought I heard you say that they kind of didn't care about that.
No.
So are they supportive of these efforts?
Absolutely.
My experience with Homefront is they have detailed plans for wellness campuses, permanent supportive housing efforts. So it sounded to me a little dismissive, and I want to make clear that I think Homefront has to be at the table here.
They are 100% at the table, and Patty was with us on the trip.
Yeah, I knew that.
What I guess I was saying is, it's when you look at the project that they're doing in the Heights, from what I understand, which is limited because I don't work for Homefront, is that is a housing project. It is not a permanent supportive housing project. And so the only difference is that this would have full case management. Homefront is an active, valued partner in this. And Patty was one of the people that would have given this report. I mean, we've talked about, would Patty do it? Would Dean do it? Would Riverstone do it? They're all community partners that are coming to the table to make this work.
Thank you, Mayor.
You bet. Councilmember Gulick?
Yeah, I guess just finishing that thought as well. I mean, I think that there was a good slide there that showed kind of the continuum, not only of care, but there's a continuum of housing there, and the permanent supportive housing was kind of the next step after that was the affordable housing that would be like the project in the Heights as well as the Jackson Court. Question I had was I didn't pay close enough attention to all the different partners in Idaho and Boise that were funding it, but were hospitals involved as well there? I mean, we see that the hospitals here in town are among the hit the hardest in terms of
Yes, there was healthcare involved. I know one of the agencies was included in the partners slides. I don't remember the specific names, but yes, healthcare was definitely a partner.
in both the upfront construction cost as well as the ongoing support, I guess, is maybe the.
I believe they did provide some grant funding originally. I'm not 100% sure on that.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Tisdale and Councilmember Neese and Joy?
Dean?
Yeah.
This data right here is like 2+ years old?
It probably is, yeah.
Yeah, do we do anything as far as updating that, or have we updated that at all, or where did this come from?
This is from the Billings, Downtown Billings Alliance, from their survey, and I believe they've updated it once at least since the original. Does anyone know for sure?
And this is the update?
No,
No.
I think it's the old one. I think it's 5 years old. Yeah, it's 5 years.
I was.
So this is probably the 5-year-old one then?
Sounds like, I was thinking this was the update from one from like 12 or 15 years ago. But
So my understanding is there have been 3, maybe 4. The original one was in 2007. There was another in 2011-ish. There was one in 19, and this is the one from 20. And I know that they're currently getting the information so that they can do a follow-up, because now they have access to AMR, which was one of the records they were missing. And as far as the hospitals that were out on the trip, I know that Intermountain Health was there. There was somebody there from Rod. Yeah.
Our local?
Yeah,
Yep.
local was
Yeah, our local.
Intermountain Health, Billings
Billings
Clinic,
Clinic and Riverstone Health.
and Mental health center is there as well.
Yeah, so we had great representation locally, yeah.
And
Follow up on his question.
county commissioner.
Oh, yep.
Councilman Kenny said he has something specific on that.
Yeah, what I would like to do is just follow up on Dan's question. When you look at this, you have the St. Vincent's, you have Billings Clinic, and you have the BPD. Where is the crisis center? The crisis center receives tax dollars. It also is a Billings Clinic and St. Vincent's also puts dollars in because it's a three-legged stool. And so it should be in there. And the other piece is it shows 93 people that use those services. It would be nice to see how many services that of these people use the crisis center and how many of them are return visitors every 2 or 3 nights to the crisis center. Because if the taxpayers are paying money into the crisis center and we're still seeing numbers like this, then maybe the crisis center needs to be revamped to be able to do a housing project and offer some of those services with that housing project. Just an idea. Thank you.
And I will just say that the Crisis Center has been a strong partner on this. Marcy Neary did also join us in Boise. And I know the Downtown Billings Alliance, or at least with talking with Cody Christensen, they do recognize they want to add more than this. They also want to add quite a bit of data in the future. So, well.
Thank you. Councilor Neese and then Councilor Troy.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is similar to what was asked here, but I want to just clarify and the chart and data being old, and I'd like to see more recent data, and at least knowing that this data is old. So I thank you for at least establishing how old this is now. But as said, I don't know what is all encompassed in this, but because this number has been floating around for quite a while. My concern is the city and other partners have done a lot of work in the last 4 years since this has been produced. And we've heard from some of these communities, some of these different organizations that they've eliminated of these 93, many of these off of the list. And so I'm concerned at really how valid this particular graph is really trying to sell this program to the council. But more importantly, as was mentioned, Billings PD and maybe some of the county is a minor, well, not minor, but it is a minor portion of the expenses. And so is this presentation going to be presented to the hospitals who appear to be having the brunt of the cost for having this type of a program not being in the city?
The hospitals were actually part of the COC. In fact, we have April Keipel here today with St. Vincent Healthcare. Billings Clinic also has been a strong partner. They did also attend. And then we have, Eric Owen with Riverstone Health. So we do have great partnership, great commitment from all of the healthcare providers.
Okay, do you anticipate them doing something, again, on a permanent type of a funding source? Since if their costs are going to, assuming, according to what was stated here, 60% reduction, instead of spending $5.1 million, it's going to be 60% less of that. Do you anticipate them trying to have some funding sources for that?
I anticipate that we will be making that ask to them, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Troy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The numbers that are, I'm just going to go back to community innovations. Community innovations really drove BPD and what became the resource officers or the downtown police to come up with some numbers. So the identified utilizers are people that had contact with Billings Police Department. So they are not people that were identified. They were people who were constantly being identified by the same officers downtown. So these numbers were driven by that. They weren't driven by a plan or a desire for housing. They simply wanted to know, what does it cost? when the fire, and at that time in 2020, the fire trucks were coming every single time that there was a 911 call. So these utilizers are identified from contact with BPD and with the fire department and AMR, and as it says, AMR data is not in there. So I think that an update of the data would be wonderful. I don't think the numbers, who knows what the numbers will be, but it's partly what has driven us to understand the value of the mobile crisis response. Is this data right here. So I think that we shouldn't try to put this data into this plan without understanding where it came from. However, it's the only data that you have that actually gives us some idea of those numbers. So of course, it's what you have to draw on from what we know. So that is just a little bit of background. Community Innovations drove this. BPD and the resource officers downtown drove this data and drove the interest in collecting this data. My question to you is, you were talking about some of the different units that Boise has in their pipeline, and I know this isn't a hard and fast answer, and you're just working on your plan, but how many units do you identify that we could really create in this community that would have a real impact? Have you got any idea in terms of the number of units it would take to have a good impact? Thank you.
And you're right, we're still working on the details and specifics of that with this next planning stage. But in our early discussions, we've talked about around 100 or even more that really could be needed to fulfill the need. And as Boise, we're probably not gonna be able to start at that level. We've talked about starting more 20, 25 or so, and really getting that down running smoothly and then replicating that and making that scalable.
Dean, question about this chart, which is so important. We've talked about these numbers for a number of years. Do we know what percentage of these 93 high utilizers are true transients versus local homeless? And the reason for asking, of course, is if they're truly passing through town, they're going to continue to pass through town, and they're not going to be good candidates for permanent supportive housing. My understanding nationally is that the person you see on the street is roughly 90% are people who've been homeless in that community, or the last time they were housed in that community. I don't know if that applies in this case, but did we collect data on that group to know what percentage you could correctly characterize as transient versus chronic homeless in your own community? Do we know those numbers?
Tough question. I do not personally. Does anybody have? Terry knows pretty much everything, I think. So.
No, but I'm
You can make it up.
Survey.
Okay.
So what I understand is that could be extrapolated because they have their name, they have their identifying, because it came through Billings PD. So they should be able to extrapolate that, but we can specifically ask that they do that in the next round of surveys. And the thing that I always go back to is this is not entirely accurate, right? So it's 4 years old, we acknowledge that. But the fact that it's missing AMR data is absolutely, so they estimate that when it says, was it 93 or 94 unique individuals, those were the highest utilizers of services. There's lots of other utilizers of service. This just happens to be the highest utilizers of service. And they estimate that with AMR and everything else, it probably is closer to 16 or 17 million. So I will talk to Cody, who's not here because he's sick, and we'll try to get a more current.
In future surveys, I think that would be really valuable information. Chris?
So as we work on the refinement, that's a reminder, you also don't see your fire department here, and that's because that data was not being collected back in that time. So that's also added, and as was stated, our crisis response units, what our MRTs are, and then last, I don't remember exactly the formula, but it'll be important as we update information. My recollection is how you got to the list of 93 was significantly higher utilization than the first time the survey was done. So again, I'm just making up numbers illustratively, but it took 10 interactions with the police department to get on the first list. This time, it took, 20, double that or triple that because the numbers were so different. So
And Crisis Center was involved in this entire survey. They just are not broken out. A lot of these utilizers were utilizing Crisis Center services. And the other thing is, you are correct, there's a lot of agencies in town that made a concerted effort to take people off of this list. Unfortunately, because of things that have happened, the list has grown again. So we'll try to get back with some accurate data.
Okay, thank you. Just while we've got you, though, money, and Dean, anybody who went to Boise, if you got information, do you know where Boise got the money? Just coming out of their regular operating funds, their general fund, were there magic grant dollars that we might be able to access that issue?
There are lots of places where the money came from. That's where the capital stack concept came from. So some of it came from cities, some came from counties, some came from state, some came from federal, some came from investments from the hospitals, some came from, I believe there was some that came out of a university system. There's a lot of money that came from a lot of places. And so they are willing to teach us how they did it. And so we're not going to come to the city and say, we expect you to give us $35 million. You don't have it, you wouldn't give it to us. But what we can do is we can get a great group of people together, collaborate, and put together a process that makes Billings make sense.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Neese and any other, and then Councilmember Boyette, we'll try to move to public comment quickly.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of questions as far as how this, if impacted Boise, and, again, we're talking 60% reduction in services, and our $10 million, we'd look at maybe $6 million. So they must not have had it as big a problem because they only had a $2.6 million cost savings or avoidance. So I'm wondering how that really there will fit ours, and how they came about that number. Do we anticipate that if this program goes forward, that we will be able to, you guys will be able to report to the city and to the stakeholders that, hey, we've had X number of dollars as a formula, they figured out how to do it, that we know how to do it?
We definitely do, and I think that's a big key to that discussion we had about the outside evaluators. So that's been a big part of our discussion, is making sure we have that data experts, those collection people, so we can report that back. And I would encourage you to go to their website for the Boise group, because they do have more data updated recently. That's just one I pulled out just for time's sake here. But there also is some others that's got some pretty impressive, more longer-term results also.
Okay, and Mayor, another follow-up question. Regarding how it impacted the entire city of Boise, do you know what their homelessness rate went to from what to what during this time frame that they kind of did this? Because I anticipate, we have the highest users, obviously some of them are not going to want to participate. They're going to be on the street still. And those are the highest users. Those highest users probably will not be in this program. Maybe some of them will, but not all of them. So, but how did it impact the homelessness in Boise? What effect did it have on it?
So I don't remember any specific data jump up if somebody does. I know one thing is this was just part of their overall strategy for homelessness. So permanent supportive housing really, it's not a strategy that's going to end homelessness in any city. It really is targeted just at that very specific population. And that was just one part of their strategy, and they also had a much broader work that they did. But go ahead, Councilman.
Yeah, if I could, Mayor.
Please.
Just so some numbers. In 2016, Boise's point-in-time count was 867. In 2023, it was 687. It dropped to a low of 502 in 2021 before rising again through COVID. So as Dean pointed out, all these units weren't responsible for that. They had a broader strategy, but this certainly impacted what they're seeing there.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Boyette?
Thank you, Mayor. I mean, over the last 4 years I've been here, we've had a lot of agencies come before us. They all have their own board of directors, their own mission statement, their own building, their own priorities. And they haven't, in my opinion, they haven't worked and played well together to form a group. How are you going to do that to get everybody that's involved? There's a lot of moving pieces. How do you get them to say, give up yours and come with us? And because some of them don't want to do that. So help.
Yeah, I totally get that. Yeah, excellent question. And I think that's something we've been working on the last several years as part of the COC together, and I think we are at a point now where we're there. Especially when it comes to this project, there is so much passion for this project, there is so much need for this project. People have repeatedly stood up and said, I'm putting the needs of my agency behind, and I'm stepping up to say we're gonna do what's best for this program. So I totally get your point. I've seen the same thing many times. It's tough, but I think the COC is at that point for this project right now. And there are so many partners that are just inspirational in their ability to step up on this project and do what's best to make it happen.
Very good. Chris, looks like
Mayor, the other, and council, other thing I would say with the work that's happening between the COC and the SAC, Substance Abuse Connect, that there's been a significant kind of transformation in them collaborating together over the last few months. And then specifically at a high level, working with Zach Tarakitis, who oversees SAC, and his work with the partners who are here tonight. A shift we want to make is that in the past, it was quite common that grants were driving what we would do. So there'd be a grant out there, here's the criteria for the grant, and we would make whatever adjustments we needed to make to get that money. And a fair amount of money has had to be given back under that approach. What we're trying to lean much harder into is what is the Billings plan, and I'm overgeneralizing, but what's the Billings plan for attacking these issues? How do these grants fit into that plan and apply? Ted is helping us, our grants administrator, apply for the components that fit our plan. So our plan is the driver, not what the grant opportunity is being the driver. How does this fit your question? To a degree there, also, instead of you and the county commissioners, to be candid, or anyone else who's got money, listening to whoever's making a pitch up here and whoever we buy into their pitch most and give them money, no. What's the overall plan? Where does your particular service fit into delivering that plan, minimizing, it's not going to eliminate, but minimizing to a degree that unhealthy competition, hopefully expanding the coordination and collaboration to implement the plan. And that won't come overnight. It won't come super simple, but the indication is there's a serious commitment to make that change and see the benefit of that change as we're going forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Council, I recommend we open it up for some public comment, and we can come back to council if there are further questions or comments that council would like to express. So anyway, this is an opportunity for public comment. Please come forward. Ask that you tell us your name and address in 3 minutes, and you know the routine.
Catherine Card, 2815 4th Avenue South. I just want to remind you that at the base of this, before permanent supportive housing, there is good low barrier shelter to make that transition, to help people make that transition off the streets. One of the things that, who said it? When you were talking about Boise, they made a political decision to do this. That implies to me that the political leadership, the elected leadership, got together to be a force of determining this is the way, this is the plan we have to do. And I really, like I've been saying the last few times that I've spoken, I really encourage you to take that role. You can do it, it's appropriate, and you are the leaders, and you can push on this, get it adopted as the city's plan. It takes time, but you are important in that process. You have to be there, not just sitting here like I've seen in the last few years where you ask the competing groups to come up with their ideas and then you vote on one of them to give money to. I think that other way, I think Chris was saying it too, that other way where you are looking for a direction for this city. and you are leading that plan is a wonderful approach and a wonderful thought. The other, real quickly, Marcy's mantra, even though it was kind of implied that it's a shelter or it fits that niche, Marcy's mantra is the crisis center is not a shelter. It's not to be thought of in that same vein. It is not a shelter. Sometimes it does give shelter to people when there's no other place, but that's not its purpose. Thank you all.
Thank you. Other public comment? Anybody else who would like to comment on item number 2? Welcome.
Hi. So I know you guys have received a lot of data, and I just want to kind of share with you one of the human elements that I became familiar with in working on this. It really started as trying to provide a night of shelter, warm, safe, dry night of shelter for a gentleman who had been downtown for 40 of his 69 years on Earth. He is a Billings resident. He worked at the Northern. He worked at the Doubletree. He's not a transient. He moved to Billings when he was 15 when he left home, and he has been here ever since. And his name's Bill Meyer. Bill, when I first started trying to get him a place for shelter, he was really reluctant to take help because he had tried to get help many times and been told many times why he was beyond help. Primarily, he had incontinence, so he couldn't toilet himself. He also had problems transferring himself. Through the course of getting Bill housed, which the COC did through our coordinated entry efforts, what we found is that housing is not enough. The struggles that Bill faced once he got housed were enormous. And I feel really proud of the work that we did to get him housed. But in the end, this gentleman was essentially starving to death in his home with all of the efforts of coordinated entry trying to help. We reached out to all of the different services, Meals on Wheels, Big Sky Senior Services. He had a Medicaid waiver for in-home health care. We never got that in-home health care. So when we think about these services that can pay to support people to stay in their homes, we can't necessarily count on all the funding sources that are there now. We need to really get innovative and outside the box and think about what do we need to do to keep them housed? What do we need to do today to help this person stay housed? What do we need to do tomorrow to make sure that instead of him going to get his groceries from the convenience store across the street, where he was eventually hit by a car, and that's what put him in ICU. He stayed in ICU for a month at that point after being hit by a car while crossing the street to obtain his groceries, even though he had a Medicaid waiver for home health help, 2.5 hours a day, 3 days a week. And he eventually went to the advanced care hospital, where he spent another month before he was going to go to rehabilitation. This was a man whose will to survive was beyond anything I've ever seen or experienced in my life. Almost instinctual, right? He surprised the doctors at every turn. Not only did he fight to get himself housed and to stay housed, he fought to stay alive at the very end. He did pass away on February 5th. He passed away warm, safe, and dry with great health care, which is something he did not enjoy for 40 of those years on the street. So when we think about these decisions, even if it's just one person, he had 26 interactions with law enforcement in an 18-month period on the streets downtown, and he was discharged from one single ER 48 times in that 18-month period back to the streets for law enforcement to respond to him. When he really got on my radar was when he was in the jail for 16 days through the MAP program, and he eventually bailed himself out because he had no intention of going to treatment. That's my story to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Any other public comment? Item number 2. Any other public comment? No one is coming forward. We'll close the public comment period. Council, this is not an action item, but before we move on to item number 3, just want to ask if there's any further questions or comments. Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. When these houses, Tommy, you may know how they do this. When they run these houses, are these? Is there an oversight? There's someone. Are people allowed to inhabit the house and they're alcoholic, they're drunk, they're doing drugs? I mean, is there any ground rules to these homes that?
Good question. Yeah, there are ground rules, and that's something that will be developed during this final planning process. I know in Boise, they had an on-site person there 24 hours a day to kind of keep an eye on that, track that. Any other insights on that might be helpful?
So does that mean if they're not following the house rules, they could be evicted then?
They could be,
Most of the time, they just redirect.
it's mostly designed to, instead of just kick them out, exactly, help them learn from
Help
it,
them-
redirect that, get back on track.
Right.
So it could be if it gets to that extreme point, but it's really every effort is made to get beyond that, stabilize it, and use that as a learning experience to grow and get better.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, very good. If that's it, council, thank you, presenters, thank you, public, very interesting.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to further information. Item number 3, the Babcock Theater update. John, Kevin, Matt, anybody else want to participate?
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for allowing me to share a little bit. I'm here to do 2 things this evening, and I was told I only have a certain amount of time, so I'm going to do as fast as I can, but if you know me, that's going to be a little bit of a challenge. I was told by Mayor Cole that I could bring these. These have tickets and information and a free drink to experience our space, because at the end of the day, I am here to share the story of who we are, how we got to where we are, and then the second thing to kind of talk about the future. So I'm going to trust them with them. So if you don't see them, you know Chris is responsible.
And Matt, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Apologize.
Most of us know you, but people might be watching who don't.
That's okay. My name is Matt Blakesley. I'm the executive director and founder of Art House Billings, and I'm excited to share all the things about who we are and where we're headed. So I was born and raised here in Billings, Montana. And it was a little over 10 years ago that my wife and I were trying to figure out where we wanted to go next. We were both natives here, but at the end of the day, we knew that there was another phase of our life coming. We ended up really believing in this community. This is where our family is. This is where people that we know and love are. And we just think this city is so great. And so we thought, if we're going to stay here, what's something that we wish personally our community had? I am not a film buff. I'm not a movie expert on any level. But at the end of the day, we had experienced other communities and spaces that had something known as independent cinema or independent movie theaters. And for us, we felt like, what if we were to bring this to our community? And it was at that point that we launched this thing known as Art House Billings. Art House Billings started at 109 North 30th Street. Some of you maybe saw this now historic space. This is where we began and opened our doors in 2015, just around 75 seats with the bar stools, and we could set up folding chairs in the back. But our design and our desire in this small space was not only to come in and have a beer or a wine and the best popcorn on planet Earth, we think, but to experience some really interesting off-the-wall films. Independent cinema is smaller budget films. These are films that usually critics are talking about. They're winning awards, but we did not have a history, particularly in the last couple decades, of seeing them here in Billings, Montana. And we thought, as the largest community in our state, this should be a space where culturally things are happening, we should be engaged. So whether that's stories about our backyard, like Neither Wolf Nor Dog, or Makoshika, a locally made documentary, or just this out there documentary about this really avant-garde designer, incredible woman named Iris, these films would not have been seen in our community if Art House did not exist. We saw hundreds of people come out and check these films out, and we were so excited to hit the ground running in 2015 and start to build this thing. But more than watching or showing movies, we started to see something happen over and over again, and that is this became a space for connection. We believe and we see that art is an opportunity for wherever you are on something to have a connection. As you probably know, we live in a polarized culture and society, and in that, it can be difficult to feel like you have disagreements with somebody and to find safe space to have those disagreements. There's something about our culture that film still exists as one of those things that you can love a film and I can hate a film and we can still really get along, and it's okay. So at the end of the day, we saw great connections happening in this space, and we believed and started to transition our organization as a 501c3 nonprofit. More than just showing films, we are here to connect our community through film, art, and culture. We picked this location on purpose. It's at 109 North 30th Street, right in the heart of downtown Billings. We picked it because it has a history known as center lanes. I don't know if any of you ever bowled here. I threw a couple strikes in my day, but this space closed in the early 2000s, and the previous building owner had just taken all of the equipment out, and that space had essentially become warehouse, vacant space that was not being activated. So we moved into that front corner and opened Art House always having visions and dreams for this 8,000 square feet of what we wanted to do. It's the reason my wife and I stuck in the community. It's the reason we started this thing known as Art House, to try and activate that vacant space. And so we were on board, we were ready to go. And then in 2018, we started to hear rumblings about this space known as the Babcock Theater. As you might know, the Babcock Theater in 2018 came under city ownership, and city council at the time had put out an RFP wondering if there's any outside organization that would partner with the city in managing this historic theater. As someone that was born and raised in Billings, Montana, the Babcock Theater was iconic. Yes, that marquee, that ticket booth, but also was dark for the majority of my childhood and adulthood. You weren't sure what was in there. Was there a stage? Was the screen still there? Was it haunted? You just didn't know. And for us and for myself driving through downtown, never truly getting to engage that space fully. So in 2018, when the RFP went out, asking different organizations, I don't know if it was ignorance, I don't know if it was ego, it might be a little bit of both, but myself and our board of directors felt like this might be one of the reasons we exist as a nonprofit in our community. This is a historic movie palace. They don't make movie theaters like this anymore. There are thousands of people in our city that remember this as a movie theater. Their first kiss, their first date, their first film happened in this space. And on top of that, that marquee is iconic for our city. 70 to 90% of the advertising and marketing that we see for Billings does feature that marquee. So at the end of the day, we felt like we're here to serve the community. We know how to do movies. This wants to be a movie theater. Let's go for it. So in 2018, we were awarded the RFP and put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears with a lot of great community partners, and we're able to open the Babcock Theater. We surprised ourselves by seeing hundreds, literally 720, because we didn't have an empty seat in the house, show up. You can vaguely see Mayor Cole cutting the ribbon, so it's official. It happened because he showed up. Thank you, Mayor Cole, for doing what you do. But we were so excited, not only to see that grand opening, but since that day, to continue to see activity, to continue to pour a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this space, and bring the lights truly on for everybody to experience. Since opening in 2018 to date, we've seen around 120,000 tickets sold to different events and different films at the Babcock Theater. For me, this is so significant, not just because of the fact that we get to sell a lot of tickets, but understanding and realizing, sorry, this thing stopped moving. There it goes. Oh, and now we're just going to run through the rest of it. Our ability to activate that space in so many different ways for so many different kinds of community, whether it's a locally made film about Caramel Cookie Waffle, Cookie Man doing spaghetti westerns where we serve spaghetti and show old spaghetti westerns. But for me personally, as a young dad, to see the next generation have this become their favorite movie theater to go to. It's clean. Again, we have the best popcorn around. We got beer, wine, soda, candy, and popcorn. It truly is a community space, and we love the opportunity to continue to do great things here. So in 2018, we took that on, and that has been our journey up to this point, which leads us to today, that we see ourselves as Art House Billings. We're one organization with two locations, just a block apart, Art House Cinema and Pub, 109 North 30th Street, and the Babcock Theater on 2nd Street. In the midst of the Babcock, however, we never forgot about this back space. Again, this was the reason we showed up and what we had dreams and vision for. And we are so excited, and I'm so honored to be able to stand before you tonight and say this past November, we got to see that dream truly activated, where we opened Art House Phase 2, as we call it. This is something that has truly been a labor of love for a lot of years and is not just because of me. There are supporters on the council. Thank you for your donations and membership. But even more than that, we've seen 2,500 unique donors give to this project. They say they want to see this happen in the city of Billings. We've seen different grants and foundations step up. We've seen businesses and contractors step up. We were able to build this thing out for close to $1 million in savings because of so many volunteers and people showing up. So much so that when you walk through this space, again, this is a communal space, a connection space, and we have names all over it because we want to celebrate and showcase that this truly is the city of Billings stepping up to say we want to see something like this happen. This is the old theater space that's now converted to a restaurant. You can hang out there before or after a film or just come in and have a bite to eat or a drink. But most significantly for us, we have now activated that backspace to be 3 screens. This allows us to not just show more movies, but to open ourselves up for more different events. So whether that's a nonprofit that's showing a documentary about the work they do in the community or the world, we now have a platform for them to come in and see that happen and have that connection space as well. We do a lot of private corporate events and things like that as well. Again, this is community space. So I'm here tonight to update you on this is what we've been up to. Again, you got a membership brochure, you got a newsletter about all the things that are happening at both of our locations, along with a couple tickets. Those will work both at Art House or the Babcock, whatever your pick. I would love to walk any of you through either of these spaces and see what we've done. I want to say thank you on behalf of our board, our members, our donors, because at the end of the day, the City of Billings was one of the largest contributors to this project through TIF funding, so thank you for what you do. I am not someone that comes from money, but I'm somebody that believes in this community, and it was organizations like you and so many people in our community choosing to partner together to make this happen. You have no idea the number of people that walk into our space and say, I can't believe Billings has a place like this, and I get to just be so proud of our city. But, as I mentioned, we're also here to talk about what's next. And when we think about what's next, there's always been this big elephant in the room for us, but we've been very focused on that build out and at Art House and our vision and dream there. And what's next, as many of you know, that elephant in the room is this beautiful thing known as the Babcock Theater. We, up to this point, have invested over $100,000, whether it's through HVAC upgrades or maintenance issues, whether through keeping the marquee up and running, just different things that happen in this historic 720-seat theater. As you can imagine, a lot happens. And in the last 5 years, we have lovingly done what we can to keep this theater up and running. But in the last year, we've identified some key areas that we know that we really want to focus some time and attention. First and foremost, the sidewalk and vault. As you might know, there's many downtown properties that the sidewalk is actual basement space or a vault, and this is one as city property that we see as a liability not only for us but the city, so we're just working our best to inform you that this is a thing. But when you look at that vault, there's major corrosion on the supports and structures there, and we are so grateful that nothing has happened to this point, but we have identified we need to fix that structurally and make sure that that is safe. You'll also notice on the right there, there's that glass tile work. That is historic tile that used to be around the entire perimeter of the Babcock property. We have a dream and a vision and a plan to not only structurally secure the vault space, but to re-pour the sidewalk and to install those glass tile blocks under our section of the sidewalk as well. That would be tied in with the marquee. So when that marquee lights up, changing downtown Billings around 5 nights a week right now. So with those glass block, again, just transforming that. So we've got a plan to do that. On top of that, we've got exterior doors and entry floor that need a lot of TLC. The entry doors were installed in the 80s, and they don't do much in keeping air in or out. And they're not the most secure thing on planet Earth either, and we see that there's a great need to update those and put in new exterior doors. And then you see that lovely stained concrete sidewalk. Obviously, it's not the best to look at for a historic theater. On top of that, it's not the safest thing to walk on when it gets wet. So we want to identify that, put in historic tile along with the exterior doors. And last but certainly not least, that marquee. Again, we've invested a lot of time and energy over the years to keep that thing up and running. We think that's a huge part of our work, but there's a lot of rusting and a lot of issues that are taking place. And so we've identified ways that we would like to update and make sure that that marquee has another 70 years of life in front of it. When we look at these things, again, we've been working on this for the last year. These are the identified costs for those things to be executed and make happen. But as we jumped into the marquee, John is going to share some things. He talked and did his work with his department to share that actually more than lipstick and rouge, which is what that $50,000 is set aside for, this thing actually needs to be repaired again, so we have 70 years and we're not just 5 years out and we've got more rusting issues. So in that moment and in that case, we thought this is one of those opportunities as city property for us to come and say, we are committed to making these things happen, and we're asking to partner with the city to help make this complete marquee rehabilitation happen. Art House is invested from our pocket, from grants, from donors, from the work that we're going to do to, in the next year plus, put that into the property to make those things happen. And I believe John has some specifics on what we're going to be asking to help the marquee restoration.
Great. Thank you, Matt, and thank you for your hard work over the years and your team's hard work.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate that. So I think it's great that the city owns the Babcock Theater. However, owning historical buildings comes with a cost. And we can certainly see that with the information included in the staff memo, in addition to some of the other items that we need to repair and rehabilitate. Historically, no entity has been good with maintaining the built environment. And we can see that with the cost estimate that's come through on the marquee sign. My experience with cost estimates is they always come in low. So we're looking at roughly 200,000 or so to completely rehabilitate the exterior marquee. With that said, Kevin and I met with the Babcock Improvements Committee a couple times, of which Councilmember Shaw is on there, and we discussed all of the deferred maintenance items, and they were in agreement after our last discussion that the rehabilitation of the marquee is a item that we should bring to council and ask them to appropriate funds for, primarily just because of the historical significance and the fact that it's such a visible element in the downtown Billings corridor. So with that said, assuming that council does approve us to move forward with rehabilitation of the marquee, facilities would issue an RFP so we can get that complete scope of work and total cost of that project and then come to council for approval. The biggest unknown is if council does approve, where are those funds appropriated from? We historically have not been good putting funds aside for the Babcock Theater, and we have no funds in reserve for any rehabilitation or repair work. So that's currently where we sit. And with that, I'll yield to the floor.
Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you. What's the Babcock worth if we put it up for sale, just for the sake of argument, if anything?
I would defer to our broker on that, who's not here this evening.
But I mean,
we can certainly ask them.
Are we putting more money into something is it worth, can we sell it for $1 million or $300,000? I mean, just a dumb question.
It's a good question, Mayor and Council. I think that something like that's intangible, and trying to put a value on that return is a really difficult proposition.
Yeah. I don't know, a lot of people are buying movie theaters nowadays. There's a couple out there that aren't doing too well. Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. John, I sent you some emails earlier today, and one of the things I was asking was, you know, how much is the city leasing the property for? And it turns out it's $1 a year. Now, we lease the Mustangs. We have an MOU with the Mustangs, and they lease that property from us, and yet they put money into a reserve every single year so we can handle things like signs and all kinds of stuff that needs to be done. I think I heard the gentleman say that he put $100,000 in over the last 5 years. I know we don't know yet how much the city's put in to that, but I'm wondering if there's a different arrangement we can come up with where we're not suddenly hit with these deferred maintenance items, because I haven't seen a financial report or annual report from this group the entire time I've been on city council to know that there's any of these issues until suddenly now it's a $300,000 to $500,000 fix. So what's the chances of some of this being done now, but yet a new lease drawn up so that some deferred maintenance can be offset by a lease charge, which with a funding a fund for some of this deferred maintenance. It sounds to me like the community is supporting this organization. They're expanding to a different location. And I don't know if that money is coming just from donors or if it's coming from revenue from the Babcock to be able to go into this organization. So it'd be nice to see some of the, how this money is being collected in and then being used back into the Babcock. Because what do you say, 125,000 tickets over 5 years is what I heard. So do you have any idea? I know I asked you a lot of questions there all at once, so if you can kind of pick and choose what you want to answer at this time.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I believe that Councilmember Neese's recommendation is a good one. We certainly need to be putting funds aside every year so we're not hit with these major issues and then we come with this large ask and then again in another year or two we have another major large ask. I would defer to Kevin on the lease amendment, but I think that's a conversation between administration and legal department, but I certainly think that it would be warranted.
So Councilmember Neese, I'll just add a a couple of things. You know, Art House has contributed significantly to repairs that were probably on the city's responsibility side in this. So they have been paying more than the $1 a year lease, you know, through those types of things. How I read the lease and how we've interpreted it is the city should be responsible for the infrastructure pieces of that. And like I said, they have contributed significantly to some of those items, along with then upgrading sound, lights, things of that nature that if they would pull out, that they would take with them. Number two, there was an ad hoc committee established by the council back in 2017, I believe, that really set out, you know, number one, to put out the RFP for what we were going to do with the Babcock or management of the Babcock, and then the committee who selected and then negotiated that lease. So certainly if council wants to switch directions, then we'll have to review that if we want to switch directions in that aspect.
Very good. Councilmember Rowan?
John, in our packet, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but we had an estimate from Cushing Terrell. Do I understand that their estimate for the exterior signage is $150,000? Or am I misreading that?
Yes.
Yes, I'm misreading it, or yes, that's their assessment?
So that total 150 cost is not in addition to those other costs, so it'd be a summation if added up.
Oh, I see. So these are all the listed, but we're still
they're-
saying 50,000, right?
Yeah, that's what Matt and Babcock has committed. They're saying whatever the total cost of the rehabilitation of the marquee is,
They're in for
we're
50.
committing 50,000.
I see. That makes more sense. And then just one last follow-up question. The Babcock strikes me, I mean, it's beautiful on the inside. So what would happen if we just transferred this property to them? Could they finance the repairs?
That's an incredible question. It would take some different thought than we definitely.
Fair enough. That's fair.
Thank you. Other questions for John or Matt? I'll just provide a little bit of the background. The city's ownership of the Babcock goes way back. 15 years ago or 20 years ago when we first approved TIF dollars. And the deal was, well, we'll give you TIF money, but we want the building. And that was the choice that we made back then. So in 2018-19, that was time to turn the building over to the city. The owners of the Babcock Theater followed through on their end, and that's how we acquired ownership, because that's what we insisted on initially.
Question.
Councilmember Kennedy.
Chris, just a quick question. If the marquee is what John's saying, is going to cost an additional $150,000 with the $50,000 coming in from the Art House, would that be eligible for tax increment financing dollars?
So, Mayor and Council, Councilmember Kennedy, I believe so. Yes, I think it would be eligible. I think that's a discussion I think that's frankly one of the next discussions we have.
To follow up with that, is there $150,000 in the tax increment financing budget?
So since it's only been 7 days since you saw the full spreadsheet, you'll recall that after 5 years, the estimate was a balance of roughly $3,000. So in the short term, there is, but frankly, we don't just look at things 1 year at a time. So bottom line is no, but that made a number of assumptions in the budget. So I think the question to the Downtown Billings Partnership is, are there adjustments? What would be the adjustments they would make, and what would their recommendation to this body, because that's their role, they make recommendations to you on how to use tax increment financing dollars. What would be their recommendation relative to this priority, and what else they have on their anticipated expenditure list going forward?
And turn over to Councilmember Esmeralda. This was a topic specifically discussed with Bill Honaker, and I'm thinking that might be something you want to raise.
I'll get there too. I just want to make sure that I'm fully understanding the numbers that are presented, because it's a little unclear to me. So the 301,000 that's presented, I'm understanding that is Art House's contribution to the things that need to get done. Is that accurate? And then the 50,000 on the marquee, your John, your estimate is 150,000 from CTA, so there's a $100,000 delta there. Am I accurate in that?
Yes, correct. Assuming that we don't run into any issues that would.
Okay, so the total project cost here is, 401,000 and some change, with 100,000 theoretically likely coming from the TIF. So is that thumbs up?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So, Councilmember Aspenleiter, I'll just add, and there's more things that need to be done, and one of them's in a closet floor that's failing. So there are some other issues that we're going to have to deal with too.
So perfect segue. Thank you, Kevin, because that I guess goes to exactly where I'm headed with this. Is it the appropriate time, I guess, to look at the sale or transfer of this property to an entity? I mean, we've said a number of times that we are terrible property managers, and that's not our business, that's not our role, and it's not something that we should be in the business of. And as we're looking at getting rid of assets, this seems like a prime one to do that with an entity that's thoroughly vested at this stage of the game, to turn it over. And in my mind, whether we fix the marquee completely, use TIF dollars, all of that being a part of that conversation. But, at the end of whatever we decide to do, I'd like to see us looking at transferring title of this property to eliminate that long-term liability and property hold from the city. Ideally, it would go on the tax rolls, understanding this is a nonprofit, so it's not on the tax roll still. It still eliminates liability for the city in the long term, and it's something I think, should be a part of our conversation as we're looking at this moving forward.
Chris, on the issue of the TIF funding, my recollection of the conversation with Bill Honaker that was publicly held here was that he agreed that contributions of TIF, future contribution of TIF financing for government projects would be take priority over contributions of the $5 million owed to his organization. And so another possibility is the delay, if these projections were actually right on, a delay of that $100,000 component, and he would be the one who would suffer the consequences of that delay. Is that your understanding? And if so, I guess I would just encourage that you make sure that Bill and his partner are aware of this conversation. They are just one block down the street. They certainly recognize the value that the Babcock brings to central downtown, and they may think that this would be money very well spent from their perspective. So I don't know if you've had that conversation, but if not, I guess I'd encourage you to do so.
So, Mayor and Council, as you described, it's exactly the answers to the question last week. I think, though, that doesn't alter the fact that the Downtown Billings Partnership and the TIF Board ultimately reviewing their expenses, their anticipated expenses moving forward. How does this fit into that, and how do they make recommendations to this body with a balance of trying to take care of a couple of these incredible assets we own downtown. We own some of the most iconic, to simultaneously wanting to incentivize private investment to grow increment for all the taxing entities. And that's the balance that each of the TIF boards have and you have as we make these decisions. But we did speak, to your point, very specifically with Mr. Honaker, his partnership, about both this project came up as well as we are in the bidding process of the one-way conversion. So there were a couple of fairly significant public projects that we do not have, we have estimates on, but we don't have final dollars for, so.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything further? Councilmember Shaw, Councilmember Neese?
Thank you. I just have a couple comments, so you're off the hook for a minute, John. Yeah. I want to say in our discussions on the committee, I think the timeline on this is important, that these are things that need to happen in the next 12 months, not the next few years. So we really do have to make a decision on this quickly. And then to the question about transferring a lead, or, reopening the lease, transferring a deed, I really want to decouple that from the funding ask, because I think we don't want to be in a situation where we're like, take this terrible building that we've let deteriorate because we didn't invest in it properly, which was the history of what happened and why the city acquired it in the first place. So I think we at very least have to bring it up to a certain standard before we can even begin that conversation, in my opinion, just out of professional respect for Art House and all of the money and everything that they've already put into it. So if we decide to go down that road, I don't want those two conversations to be confused, because I think we do have a responsibility to make sure this is a safe building. One of the things on this list that I didn't see that we talked about in the committee was railings on the second floor, that's actually a big liability and safety issue. I think as long as the city owns that building, that's something that I would add to whatever the cost is to put those in, because we don't want somebody falling and suing the city. We just sat in executive session for an hour talking about lawsuits. So just a few comments on that. And then I have no idea if Art House, Babcock, if they would even be interested in taking this over. So I don't want to push us too far down that road until we address this and then take their temperature on that before we go, creating another ad hoc committee or something like that.
Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. I actually agree with what Councilmember Scott said.
Well, you did it.
I'm going to have to practice that one. But I think that we know how fast the city can move on something like this, which is really slow. But we saw what this Matt, you did with your private investments, around the corner. And so he's able to leverage a whole lot more than the city can with volunteers and donations and different things that the city's never going to be able to do. And I think if because of the way we've changed some of our policies on disposing of property, I think this could be a faster transfer over. And we could see this property transfer over. We have a group that has proven the fact that they can take care of it as far as really making this really what it was designed to be downtown. And they're not going to just take it and sell it for a profit. I don't believe that. If you were concerned about that, have some kind of reversionary clause in it. But I think the idea of moving this forward is something we as a city council should at least explore. And I would like to make a motion to direct staff to bring that after discussion with them so that we can consider that option to try to fast track this for them, because they can actually, again, I think they can work a whole lot faster to get the repairs done on this than we as the city can do through the RFP process and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, thank you very much. We will open up for public comment.
That was a motion to direct staff to. If there's not a second, then I'll let it lie.
Okay. Councilmember Aspenlater makes the motion. I guess I have some question about the propriety of the motion just because it wasn't on our agenda. We're talking about investigating the marquee, but not something of that magnitude. Sort of a procedural question.
I think it's just to bring the issue back to us for conversation, what it would look like to explore that. It's not saying bring an actual proposal saying, hey, you're ready to sign. It's saying, let's take a look at this as one of the options to fast track this and move it forward.
At least start discussions with Art House if Art House is interested.
So if they may come back and say no way.
Just a second. So if I'm hearing it right, if this motion would pass to direct staff, you want us to directly negotiate with Art House to see what a potential agreement could look like, because we can do that under our disposal ordinance at this point. So is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, yes, that is.
Okay, and that's consistent with Councilmember Aspenlater. Okay. Councilmember Joy, Councilmember Kennedy, Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Wouldn't it be more responsible for the city, if it's choosing to dispose of this, to look at more than one buyer? I mean, usually if the idea is that council wants to maximize the value of this building, going into negotiations, even though I know that they've put their commitment in their 100,000, it seems like I'm not sure how firm our handshake is on some of the thinking that we have right now. They've put a huge amount of investment into this building, but if the motive of the council is to maximize the value of the property, then just going into negotiations with one person wouldn't seem like that's the best idea. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Kennedy, just a reminder, we do have this motion on the floor.
I do have to say that if this is going to be surplus property, we could ask Matt and the Art House to come back with a proposal, but we could also ask for a few other proposals out there, so we didn't have just one, like Councilwoman Joy had just said, because the one thing is, if this is city-owned property, it's got to have some type of notice and give other people an opportunity. And so you may look at that and review that and go forward, because I would like to see that the Art House come back with some type of proposal, but I don't think we can do that unless you open it up. So that's a concern I do have.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Boyette.
I guess my comment would be, I agree with Council Member Shaw that before we do anything, we need to fix it up. And I'd like to see what all the bills we need to fix that are, like Kevin was mentioning, there's something else. Before we put it up and get rid of it or try to get rid of it, we need to fix it before we did anything with it. So I think part of that would be that we need to finish what this is first before we bring that out.
Thank you.
Just as a comment.
Councilmember Neese, Gulick, and Councilmember Espliner, did you have your hand up?
Did you mean
Councilor Rupsis and Gulick?
Thank you, Mayor. Matt, you seem to be handling this pretty well. If I were sitting in your position, I'd probably be having a heart attack right now. I just opened a theater that I've been working on for years after taking over another theater that I really had no long-term plans of taking over. And suddenly you're being thrust to this other building that probably has no connection to your business model as you've already got it built. So you're thinking you got to leave here and go come up with a new business model that can sustain a building that you had no intention of actually owning. And you've got an existing lease on the building. How long is that lease? 15 years. 15 years. And so you're 6 years into it. Okay. To me, this is really premature. And out of respect for Matt, I can't imagine throwing this at him right now and what he's had to do just to get the Art House going and also trying to manage what they're doing. And he's come out and said, we'll raise $300,000, and here we are looking at a $400,000 to $450,000 project, and we're kind of balking at this. We do this here in Billings with our nonprofits. We look for them to take the lion's share, and we as a city, as a community, try to find our smallest possible way that we can contribute. So I'm not ready to put that on Matt. It sounded to me like you were looking to go out and do an RFP and get some actual hard estimates on what it would cost to actually do this work. And because we're not terribly comfortable with what those numbers are, they might be estimates, but who knows what they're really going to be. I would like to see you come back with that, with some proposals of how should we actually pay for this. I'm not exactly sure that TIF is the best way to go here. And I'm not exactly, and even if it is, I think the DBP might have some ideas of other things they might want to shift around, I think as Chris might have mentioned, that would cover that gap so that we're not jeopardizing what's happening with the Honaker project. So So I'm not ready to support this, but I would encourage you to bring everything back as a more formalized proposal that we can really chew on. And Matt, if you want to talk to your board and say, look, these crazy council people are coming up with this idea, what do we think about this? Is there a way to make this work and step into it in a way with all your own due diligence and thoughtfulness, and at some point have that in the future? I just can't imagine how you'd be able to do that in the next 12 months, but you've done some magic really over the last few years, so maybe you can. But I don't want to put them in that position where we're just voicing this on them and kind of forcing that. I agree with Councilmember Shaw that we need to get this work taken care of first and then deal with the potential ownership of the building as a separate question.
Thank you. Councilmember Gill.
I'm intrigued by the idea if it's mutually, if it's mutually benefit, I'm certainly interested in that, but yes, they are in a lease right now, so I think some of the ideas being floated might be problematic because we have to at least figure all that out for breaking the lease, I guess. And I do want to set them up for success, and so I think to Councilmember Shaw's point, I'm certainly interested in making sure that some things are right. And this marquee's over the public right of way. Its structural stability is really important for the health and safety of our community. So it seems like the right place for TIF or some sort of public money to be used. Always looking to minimize that. I appreciate all the work that Art House has done and is doing, and I guess I'm not saying anything new at this point. So
Thank you, Councilmember Aspliner. Council, I'll just remind us we're now at 7:35. Typically, we take a break now. We've only got one more item. We're wrapping this one up, I think. The fourth item is kind of a procedural thing, so my inclination is not to take a break, and we'll just keep proceeding. Feel free to leave if you need to. Councilmember Aspliner.
And not to speak for Councilman Neese, my intent, I guess, is not to say, hey, let's find a way to transfer this in the next 6 months. My intent is for this conversation, as we're trying to figure out what needs to be done and what investments need to be made, that we're also having the conversation and setting the table for some type of a transfer. I think we can do both things at the same time. I don't think they need to be, mutually exclusive, but I think we can parallel track these two conversations at the same time. And that's really where I'm going with this, is not to say we need to dispose of this in the next 6 months. I don't have that illusion either, but I also think that if we don't set an end and if we don't set a target end, then we'll always be talking about what could be a target end. I mean, at some point in time, we've got to say, hey, look, this is where we're going to stop, and you're going to take it, and you're going to take it knowing the liabilities associated with it, and then that's yours. And you can still go through the TIF process, just like we were going to talk about spending TIF dollars and do it that way. But at some point, there's got to be an end, and we've got to start having a conversation about an end in sight. And I think we can do both of those at the same time. So that's really where my mind is at with this. I don't think that we have to do one and then the other. I think we can have both of these conversations at the same time, not slowing either one down.
Okay, Councilor Rowan.
Just very briefly, I'm going to support this motion, and it's not, it's certainly not my intent to just try to sort of offload a problem, but to express total confidence in the incredible work you've done. My son and I go here. He has been to many, many events there, and I just think the vision for independent cinema in the community is tremendous, and I tend to believe that people do better when they're in business not with the city than when they're in business with the city. So I will support this because I think it's important that we have the conversation, but also, I mean, I would want heard that you've just done tremendous work and you should be incredibly proud.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Kennedy?
I'm going to support the motion also. If we're in a lease for 5 years and we haven't put together the checklist of exactly what all needs to be done to this building, I think at least this starts the conversation to look at the checklist and see how much it's going to cost, and then we can make a decision on, but we do want to give other folks an opportunity to look at this property too. So I will support the motion.
Okay, thank you.
So-
Anybody else? We do have Kevin.
Can I just make just a couple comments? Councilmember Kennedy, we do have an extensive list of what needs to be done in this building, but we're giving you the highlights here of kind of the things that need to be done fairly quickly. So we do have that list and can bring that to you. And just for some history, so back in fiscal year 18, the council did appropriate $500,000 for the Babcock. 373,000 of that went into some improvements, but 127,000 of it was used to purchase what they called the green room that was assigned as another condo unit. So, and then the intent of the council at that time was in fiscal year 19 to appropriate another $500,000, which never happened. So that's why we're behind the curve after year one of trying to get some of these things done. Just one other thing that I want to quickly say is Matt and his group, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but they're going out and looking for grants and things like that to help offset some of these funds too. So we're looking at different funding sources, but quite honestly, there's not a lot out there, besides the grants that we are pursuing and going, trying to get with TIF funding. I've talked to Andy extensively about what other sources could we use. We are very limited on where some funding can come from to kind of start tackling this initial problem that we have.
Okay, Council, we're ready to vote on the motion on the table.
Can you repeat the motion again?
Yeah, Councilor Neese, can you clarify your motion, restate it?
Yeah, the motion is to direct staff to explore the possibilities of transferring the property to the art house is what I had said, because I believe they've done a terrific job. Councilmember Kenny brings up some ideas, but again, the whole idea is to transfer the property to their house and have them bring back those things with a proposal. It doesn't say anything about stopping or suspending any of this work that is being done, but it would bring it back. So as Councilmember or Scott had said, I'll get that later, has said that it can be done in tandem, so we can have some decision-making process during this time. And I'll let Scott summarize that. And I know that was not a very succinct motion, sorry.
No, that's okay. It's still progress. Councilmember Aspenlater?
So, Mr. Mayor, the only thing I would ask of Councilman Neese, being the originator of the motion, is that in the process of staff pulling that together, that you give us some guidelines as to what it would look like to transfer to our house and what we would need to do legally in opening up for public bid, or what those processes would be. That
Yes, that is correct.
okay
It
with
would
that?
be along that process, because we can't just.
So that we address Councilman Kennedy's
Exactly,
concern.
yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
okay.
And Councilor Neese, if I can just ask for a point of clarification, you use the word for staff to bring back a proposal. As a lawyer, I'm thinking that means an offer, a written offer that if accepted becomes a contract, which is a further step than I guess I'm willing to go, and I think that's probably beyond what you were really anticipating.
I would say it's more the process and what the steps would be for the council to take if they chose to do that way. Investigate, thank you.
Okay, very good. Councilor Ripsis?
Thank you, Mayor. Before we vote on this, maybe we should just ask Matt.
Whether he wants.
Would you like, a minute to just say whether or not this is even in the scope of possibility for you right now?
Obviously, I'm here to represent our board, but I don't speak for the board right now. This is obviously lots of conversations and things we'd have to investigate. All I can say at this point is we got into this, and originally the lease presented to us, there might be some correction, was an initial 3-year lease with 2 or 3 one-year renewals on that. At that time, we believed that the city council had made an investment in the Babcock Theater. This is city property. It matters for our community. And we believe that we were there to partner with the city to say we want to be a part of this work that city council at that time had said they want to be a part of. So I know that there's hundreds of thousands of dollars that's been out there. I have some individuals on my board that are like, where's that money we were promised? We're not having that conversation today, obviously. All I can speak for is that we are in this because of the city partnership. If that were to go away and it would be fully on our shoulders, obviously there's a lot of questions we need to ask, and I'm not at a place to answer those right now. But yeah, is that helpful? Okay.
Okay, thank you. We'll proceed to a vote. I'll just comment, I'm happy either way. I guess I'll vote for it because I only understand it to be to start the conversation. I also agree this is probably premature, but at least we'll start the conversation. My anticipation is that if we did offer it, it would be for $0. Well, maybe $1. You got to have $1, Matt. Yeah, you got to have some skin in the game, as they say. So not a way to get rich quick, put it that way. Okay, are we ready to vote? Councilmember Joy?
I just want to be very clear in this motion that this motion is to start a process of investigating the art house taking this property. It is not a motion to start a process to value the building and to look for maximizing the value of the property. It is simply to start a process to investigate the art house taking this property. Clarification, please.
Is that consistent with your motion, Councilmember Neese?
Yeah, I think that is consistent. I think when they investigate and bring back the information to us, it would include that possibility as well as if the art house says no, and what are the options the city has to divest or consider the surplus property for someone else to take over the lease on the property. It would still be within the same use, and I think that's the consideration. But again, all of that will come out in the investigation. It's not directing the staff to go one way or the other of who can or can't take it over. But initially, they're running it, they're leasing it. It's something that they be a part of the investigation.
Mayor, I just need...
Go ahead, Councilmember Neese, or Joy.
I'm sorry, I just cannot understand the motion. The motion is to start an investigation to see if the art house would like the property. But if the art house doesn't want the property, how can we have an investigation that has a predetermined outcome? An investigation means that you look at all the possibilities, and from those possibilities, you see what might work. But it seems that if you're determining that you want to negotiate with the art house, then this is not an investigation into what we could do with the property.
I don't want to put words Councilmember Neese's mouth, but I will anyway. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but he was saying that this process would only have the art house in mind, but once you start going down that path, you never know quite where it'll end up. And so, but at this point, the only contemplated target for staff to look at is the art house. Is that fair, Councilmember Neese?
I think that's fair, but I think it doesn't require it to only be the art house, because again, during the investigation, we find our art house doesn't want to do it.
Okay, yeah, okay, I think we should probably move on to the vote. Would you agree?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm not in support of the motion.
Okay. Councilor Shaw?
I just have one more comment, which is that I completely lost my train of thought as soon as I said that. Let's just take us to a vote. It's all right.
Okay. We'll do a show of hands. If you're in favor of the motion, you've heard it stated, raise your hand. Voting in favor are council members Neese, Owen, Kennedy, Aspenlighter, Tidswell, Boyett, and myself. If voting in opposition, council members Shaw, Gulick, Joy, and Ripsis. Motion passes 7-4. We'll see what council comes back with. It might be a short conversation with the art house, but at least it will be some sort of conversation. So very good. I don't know that we ever opened this up for public comment because, again, the original discussion was focused on the marquee. Is there anybody here with us who wanted to comment on this item? No one is coming forward. So public comment period is closed. I think that concludes item number 3. Item number 4 is the Zoom meeting participation. Chris, is that just you? Justin, are you here on this item or just for something at the very end? Are you here for this item 4? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I didn't say. I thought you were, looks like Justin back there. It wasn't. Chris, item number 4.
Yes, we'll keep it brief. So you've had the memo, I assume, and in it, Denise, clerk's office, administration is just looking for direction from the council on how you want to move forward. Nothing scientific about it, just reaching out to our some of our larger cities around the state. You see a little bit of a mixed bag. I didn't get responses from everybody, but one of our fellow cities, Great Falls, you do not have an option to participate via Zoom. Doug responded up in Kalispell, they do in a similar fashion to what we're doing today. And I would guess there's several others who do that. So really the question, we're looking for feedback from the council on how it wants to proceed in this regard.
Council, Councilmember Aspenlight or Councilmember Denise?
Thanks, Chris. My personal opinion is that we should get rid of Zoom unless there's extenuating circumstances. If we've got a presenter or somebody like that can't be here in person and they request to present via Zoom, that's great. But public comment in the event, in the arena that we're in today with being post-COVID, I don't see any reason. I think it's healthier to have comments face-to-face. It creates a better dialogue. It creates a hell of a lot better respect than what we see these days from online commentary. And it means investing in actually getting engaged. It means getting off of your couch, getting out of your house, and getting down to City Hall. Our meetings are public. They're posted. They're at the same time in the same place every time. People can plan for that. We have all of the means to do that. I think we're past the point of needing to do this. So I'm in favor of eliminating public comment through Zoom altogether.
Thank you, Councilmember Nice.
I would echo what Scott just said. I agree. It really doesn't matter to me one way or there, but I think we should eliminate it. But I think the key thing we have to do there is if we're going to do it for all participants. When we look at issues, we have staff, we have council members, and we have participants. Some of them are project participants, some of them are public participants. And I think if we're going to eliminate it, we need to make sure we eliminate it for all participants in the process. So it's equal to them, so the participants need to be here in public to present to us. So I don't have any issue with eliminating it, as long as we're doing it equally among the public participants, because as items are presented to us, they should be presented to us in a fair and open way by our staff. And when we start hearing from participants who are easier to get to us through Zoom versus other public who have a harder time to get through us, then their opinions become more valuable, or at least they get to us versus them actually being a presenter. So I'm okay with it either way, as long as it's equal amongst the participants. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Gila and Councilor Boyack.
I'm open to what Councilmember Aspenleiter's presenting. I agree in general. I am a little concerned if we weren't to allow different experts that work on studies that the city is commissioned, because they have limited budgets. We want to use them as maximize their value as much as possible to for the results that they get. And so flying somebody from Texas over to Billings just for a council meeting, oh, okay, I'm sorry, I must have misunderstood. Okay, would you, Mayor, would you allow Councilmember Nice to clarify?
Councilmember Nice, would you like to clarify?
Yeah, so thank you. Because you're right, I think when the staff hires consultants that are out of state and out of area, there's no reason why they need to fly here and do that. That's not the participants I'm talking. Those are really agents of the city. They were hired by the city. They're here to give the city and us as council members information. So no, those are lobbyists. All of those type of things, should utilize the Zoom features similar to staff. If they happen to be out and they can't get in, they can Zoom. So those type of things are not, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about these is people who are not commissioned by the city, for projects. So we'll see land use issues come to us. We'll see developers come to us. Those are all public people. those are not being commissioned by the city. Those are bringing their ideas, some are for, some are against. Those should be presented to us in public if we're going to eliminate. They should be presented to us the same way, whether it's Zoom, allowed Zoom, or no Zoom.
Thank you. Councilor Boyack, Councilor
Yeah,
Kennedy.
I just wanted to follow up with that. We have legislatures in Washington. I didn't want them to have to come here, so as long as you clarified it.
Councilor Kennedy?
Kevin, since you run the Zoom and all of that, the question I have for you is, if we keep Zoom and we let people do a comment on chat, can they do that?
So Councilmember Kennedy, when we do the presentation style that we do now, or the webinar style of Zoom that we do now, we cannot chat with anybody on there.
Okay. The other question I have is, at the legislative session, and it saves a lot of money to have to run up for a quick 3 minutes, 5 minutes testimony on a bill. So they do let you go in and testify online. If we did that, the one thing we don't have, and I just want you to tell me, is we probably don't have the staff. But if there's an opportunity to look at something like that, what would it cost to be able to have public comment just like the legislature does?
So my understanding is that we're operating similar to how the legislation was operating last year, is you had to register if you had public comment. So through the clerk's office, you have to, and I can't remember the time frame, but you have to register beforehand, and then she sends you a link, and then you're allowed to then participate via Zoom. You just have to register to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilor Gulick?
Follow-up question, Kevin, then if you register ahead of time, can that prevent some of the issues we've been having here trolls?
So Councilmember Gulick, yes, I think it does to a certain extent. I think we could still have that, but it certainly puts that other pieces of the pie in there of identification, or at least them having to identify who they are, what they want to comment on, and things of that nature. And since we've implemented this, we have not had any of that Zoom trolling that we did more in the open format when anybody could get on at any point.
Okay. Other comment? Do you need direction on this evening? Did you want to get, Chris, more information from other cities, council? Do you want any further information, or you want to make a decision on this tonight? Chris, if you want to comment, feel free.
My preference tonight would be clarity. So with a mixed set of thoughts, I would candidly ask that somebody make a motion, it gets seconded, and then we have clarity. Otherwise, we don't really know.
Councilor Titswell?
Kevin, this doesn't, I guess you could register and under a pseudonym, whatever, what do you want to say? A fake name, fake phone number? I mean, you could register to get your point across online fictitiously. Is that correct?
I mean, that's correct. The clerk's office does have some protocols in place to try to, identify, if we've got false people trying to register or things like that. What happened in the past was normally a barrage of people coming in all at once. So, my opinion, it was a group of people that were trying to troll our council meetings. So, but yes, I mean, if somebody wanted to go to that extent, it possibly could be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Shaw?
I resonated with what Councilmember Aspenleiter opened the discussion with, that I'm in favor at this point of eliminating it. I do not see it really being used. It hasn't been used in a productive way. So I would just ask if you would rephrase your comments into a motion. I'd be happy to second it.
So I'll make a motion to eliminate Zoom comment participation for public members with the exception that if applicants or people doing business with the city request specifically approval by the city administrator beforehand because they have an inability to get to the meeting for some circumstance, that be taken into consideration at the city administrator's discretion.
Thank you very much. Second by Councilmember Shaw. Councilmember Asplund, I appreciate your making that final exception, just because you never know what you don't know. And
We live in Montana.
yeah, exactly. And somebody might have a lot at stake, and they just can't get here for some perfectly legitimate reason. So I appreciate that. Councilmember Kenny?
Would we have an opportunity then and look at what the state does and to see if we could incorporate that and then bring that back at a future date? Because I think it's, if the state is doing it, I understand you want to make sure it's legitimate people and they're registered and things like that. If that's, if there's an opportunity for us to do that, I'd really like to look at that. But we cannot have people just zoom in and say the things that they've been saying. So I agree that at this time, but I'd like to at least explore a little bit more so we give people an opportunity.
So Councilmember Kennedy, I believe that's how we're operating now, unless I missed something from the legislative. We're doing the similar things the state did last legislative session. So it would be the process we've got set up currently today. That's what we're functioning under of what the legislature was doing. And, to Councilmember Tidswell's question, the state has the same obligation to what did they do to identify people that registered for public comment on some of those legislative issues? So my understanding is we're operating the same as the legislature did last session.
Okay. Councilmember Neese, Councilmember Gillick?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think that since we put those policies in place, we haven't had those trolls that stopped it. And so I think that we were doing the right thing. I guess I'm going to ask Scott if this exception applies to the public when there's a snowstorm and they can't get down here, but yet we're hearing something. Are we going to, if we're going to make an exception for a developer that is developing something in someone's neighborhood, give them the same right that we give the developer to testify for their project, to allow the public who live in that neighborhood to testify against that project? Or are we only going to do one-sided?
It was a question, Councilmember Asplund, but Councilmember Owen, do you have something that you wanted that's?
Yeah, I was just going to share my opinion on that question. I would hope that we would, as Chris is preparing the agenda, that we would generally discourage people who are in Billings from coming in on Zoom. If you're in Helena or if you're out of state as a developer or if you're traveling, then fine. But I can't imagine that if we needed to grant an exception, we'd do it because someone didn't want to drive down here. Is that?
And we'll let Chris comment, but let's look at the question for Scott, so go ahead.
I think what Councilwoman Owen is referring to is exactly how I see it. We do see developers coming in from, Salt Lake and Denver and the West Coast and whatnot, and there are travel issues from time to time. We do have winter here, and that does present some issues and can cause some unexpected interference. For the most part, I think developers do try to get here whenever they can at whatever cost. I think the difference, I guess, for Councilman Neese, in my mind, is these developers have millions and millions and millions of dollars at risk, and they're going to do whatever they can under their power to get here. I don't think anybody's trying to take the easy way out, is my perspective. In unforeseen circumstances when they can't get here due to weather or family emergencies or things like that, I think we have to give them an out. I think it is different when you have a neighbor or a neighborhood that lives here that isn't going to come here to comment but want to comment publicly than it is for somebody that's trying to travel here. The other thing that I'd ask you to keep in mind is these developers also have timelines in place with their projects. Most of them are operating on purchase agreements that have sunsets. Our process that are built off of our process and timeline. So if we make them postpone, that sets off a whole nother series of dominoes in legal agreements that they have to try to get done. So I think it's different. I guess in my mind, it's a little different for the public that lives here in Billings versus the developer who's trying to fly in or has something come up that can't get here. And that's why I want, the city administrator to have that discretion.
Okay, Chris, I don't know if you wanted to comment. We're not going to be able to resolve every little possibility, but.
I don't have anything, I think, to add. I do appreciate that decision-making that can happen, and I could speculate on a scenario where a citizen legitimate had a broken leg, injured, was ill, so I think that kind of flexibility is appreciated, and I think we play it by ear and see, we've been doing this for several months and very few people participate this way. So it hasn't been a burden, but we certainly, all of us want to avoid what we saw with the trolling. That's a horrible situation. So that's what we're seeking to do, is get that right balance.
Okay. Counselor, are we ready to proceed to a vote?
Just a clarification from Chris's interpretation. Chris, I just heard you say that if a public had some extenuating circumstances want to testify, that you would allow them to do on Zoom.
Yes.
And so that is actually what I asked, and I think the motion that Chris, that I heard back was, no, it's developers only, not public. So are you okay with that? Okay, thank you. And then I can support the motion.
Okay, very good. Council, we'll move to a vote. Is the motion sufficiently clear? Okay, if in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion, good discussion, but still passed unanimously. So thank you very much for that discussion. That concludes item number 4. There is no public comment, just to be clear, or nobody with us still to make further public comment. Chris, anything in the way of upcoming agenda items you want to call to our attention?
So we will certainly be following up on the good work that got done Friday afternoon and Saturday on priorities coming into the future. I don't have an exact calendar for that yet, but please know that those good conversations were very helpful. Thank you for that time. Also know that budgets are coming before the administration here in the upcoming days. In the next month, they come in front of the Budget and Finance Committee, and over the next, in May, they'll come in front of you. So it's budget season, budget preparation season, so that's a very significant, as it should be, time-consuming effort that'll ultimately end up on your desks to make critical decisions around. So those are the 2 things I would highlight at this point.
Thank you. Any items of council discussion? Councilor Kennedy.
I have one item that I want to bring up is when we have a ordinance that someone's out of compliance with a fence, and because there's no sight distance or whatever, I would like to at least bring it back to one of our meetings and talk about the burden that it does. I have a gentleman that has a fence that's been up for 17 years, and all of a sudden he got noticed because someone turned him in and said there's a sight distance problem. What he has is the fence has been up, the ordinance has only been in for about 4 years, and we really don't have any type of grandfathering or whatever. And this is just one instance, and I would just like to have it during our discussion time of talking about it and see if there's some solutions. Because we do have Tina and the code enforcement either will follow what the rules are, or if there's something that we need to do. If we're gonna follow them like that, then maybe we need to assist some of these people to meet that. I mean, for 17 years it's been up. Do we have some ability to be able to help them out? And so I just wanted as part of one of our sessions that we discuss, and that's all I have here.
Thank you for that heads up. Just my suggestion is you talk to the city administrator, since Chris is the keeper of the agenda. And there may be another agenda item where this would be a natural fit, or it could be a standalone item. And if you can't work that out with Chris, our other process then is the initiative process, where you can essentially force something on agenda with a majority vote of the council. But there's no need to go to that initiative process if you can just work it out with the city administrator who keeps the agenda. Make sense?
Okay, I'll work with him.
Perfect. Okay, very good. If there's nothing else, we are adjourned. We're not. Is there any public comment on non-agenda items? No one's coming forward? Now we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.